All right, we are on live, and hopefully we'll start getting some folks join us. It is Wednesday, July 7th, 2021. It is July. That means we're in summer vacation, and the year is going too fast. You know, very soon is going to be Christmas. We have a great day today. It looks fairly beautiful outside as I'm looking at the window. Temperature is 81 degrees. We have a great guest today. And I just want to wish you all a fantastic, fabulous day. And Dr. John Butler is going to play a couple of tunes to get us in the mood. John.
I'm going down to the Greyhound station, gonna buy a ticket to ride. I'm gonna find that lady, 2 or 3 children, and sit down by her side. Llewelyn gonna ride up and down, you know, till the sun comes down about 2 or 3 times. Smoke a cigarette on the back seat, sing the song to the people he meets, and get along with it all. In Texas, where the people say y'all, and get along with it all. How you doing?
I think that's a shout out from John to encourage Llewelyn to move down here. As I was talking to a good old friend of Llewelyn, Sean O'Neill, who called me that he just bought a condo in Onion Creek and told me to tell Llewelyn, come on down. Llewelyn, how are you, sir?
I'm very well. Thank you. I'm listening to this askance as I hear housing prices are extraordinarily high, and I don't want to join the number of your citizens who sleep on the streets at night for the want of shelter. However, in the Lululand, which is where John and yourself seem to live, all is fine. I could join you there, but I still have some footage on the ground, as it were.
That's quite fine, Llewelyn. Remember that Digital 360 Summit is coming in August 31st to September 2nd.
I shall be there.
Fine.
Actually, probably quite soon. I've got to go to San Antonio, and I will come by and take you up on a very large drink, and then John is going to take us out to dinner. He's promised and buy us an enormously grand dinner, not talking Tex-Mex, I hope, something a little more elaborate than that, i.e. expensive.
There you go.
That is no problem. We can do this in Texas.
Fine, we'll get a couple of great bottles of Bordeaux, and we'll be on the way.
Oh yeah, I like that.
As we say in Texas, it's better to be unhappy sitting in a Maserati than on a bicycle. So we welcome you to New Braunfels, and we'll do a great job. Because the steakhouse is here in New Braunfels, I think.
There you go. All right, let me say hello to Amy Akers. Amy, how are you, ma'am?
I'm doing well today. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, we're glad that you're with us. And as you know, we have had all kinds of superstars before, and including all kinds of elected officials. And we're looking forward to engaging with you. But let me share with everybody your background. So Amy is today director at Pedernales Electric Co-op, the largest co-op in the United States, with roughly almost or over 400,000 meters. It's an amazing growth story. And she's also senior counsel at McCullough, Sudan. I hope I say that right. And Amy has had different roles in her legal career with different firms, Coquinos, Bosey, and Young. And she's also done several stints with the city of Pflugerville. And she's, as any lawyer would be, very well educated. She has her law degree from St. Marion University School of Law. And she's also about to finish her Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering from Texas State University. And she has a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and Government from the University of Texas at San Antonio. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you. Glad to be here. I have to say, though, I'm a little jealous of your weather because it's raining here and we're not that far away.
Oh, sorry to hear that. But yeah, it's cloudy here. It looks like it might rain at some point, but it's still nice and sunny. The clouds are kind of coming maybe from the south. It looks like it. Yeah. So let me start with what's going on in our world. And so COVID continues to be tamed down. The death from week to week has come down quite a bit. There's only 1,300 new deaths in the last 7 days, which is a significant improvement on controlling things. And the cases are also down, and the number of administered doses of vaccination has gone up to 331 million. That includes the first dose and the second dose. So we probably are, slightly over half of the population having gotten a dose, at least one dose. And it would be great to see if more people could finish the job and get it done and get all vaccinated so we can move forward. Stock market continues to trade slightly moving up here and there. We call it trading sideways. Everything seems to be a little optimistic. My only main concern remains the price of oil. Crude used to be $40 a while back before the administration changed hands, and it's at $75. It's not a good thing. It's the beginning of potential inflation forces. We'll see what happens. Gallon of gas in Greater Austin is at $2.69 at the lowest. That's 5 cents up from last week. The jobs report in June was a very good one, 850,000 new jobs added. However, that number didn't make a good dent into the unemployment rate, which actually went up slightly from 5.8% in May to 5.9% in June. So, we're kind of hovering there. We still need another 6 million jobs to be added to the job roles to get back to where we were before the crisis began. And the pandemic really hit us hard. So we hope that things continue to improve. I do see all kinds of signs of acceleration. John Butler, what's your take on where are we in acceleration? Where are things coming back? Where are we at?
I've been doing my man on the street, woman on the street research. And I was out at the corner bakery eating, and the person was telling me it's very, very difficult to get people to come back to work. I did a little research, and 6% of people who were in the gig economy have not returned. And so I asked the guy, I said, what's the major problem? He says, well, not only not returning to work, but perhaps negotiating a higher salary. So it might be interesting to say that, as we talked about on the program many times, that the entrepreneurs have to be very, very creative. And we really don't know what's going to happen. But the feet on the street, the wisdom of the crowd, if you will, tells me that we have some interesting things to talk about when it comes back to people returning to work. And I think it's all interactive, if you will, with the ability to work at home. It's interactive with the ability for people to sell their homes here in Austin or wherever and move other places as they take a great big bonus by selling their house. So that's one of the things that I've looked at. The other thing that I find very interesting is what's happening in the international front and how that will affect what we do here at home. When you look around and you see all the trucks rolling and all the box moving, that the general economy is doing pretty good. That the stock market is doing pretty good, but our money right now sits, of course, in lots of our dollars sit in China. So it's interesting to see how we are, quote, coming back, quote unquote, but it looks like we're going to come back in different kind of ways. And finally, being a university professor here at University of Texas, when you talk to the students, I think the juniors and seniors will prefer to stay online, and the freshmen and the sophomores would like to come back to campus. But we have an option now. If it's raining, it's stormy, then I just have the course online rather than go in for person. And I think this mega trend that's happening worldwide, the relationship, the economy, and returning to work, and people seeing a different future. So it's very, very interesting to the person who looks at innovation, entrepreneurship, and job creation.
Yeah. Llewelyn, what's your
Well,
take?
I concur with some of what Don has said, and some I am dubious of, as always. In particular, I think that we are in a bumpy period, because I think it depends on which set of signals you look at. And he expressed it very well when he said there's a shortage, essentially there's a shortage. And there's a good jobs reporting yet there's high unemployment. There is, I can tell you, a labor shortage. I took the trouble to list myself as unemployed on some local, I don't know what it was now. And I get all these job offers, which are very interesting, because how much they are paying a lot more than manual and menial jobs, which is what most of them are, than they ever have. $30 an hour, for example, it's not uncommon as an offering. That is quite a lot compared to what basically the lowest level of work paid heretofore. Now, they're not all at that level. They're scattered quite widely and quite interestingly. The post office is looking for help. FedEx is desperate for help. Restaurants are desperate for help. Amazon is desperate for warehouse people. So that's a picture. These are not the most alluring jobs you can imagine. They don't actually lead to very much. I can't imagine that there's a road to the C-suite from being a warehouse man or woman at Amazon. I think that internationally, like in many other things, we have done some things right and some things quite wrong. I have been looking this past 2 weeks at Central Asia, particularly Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, and how they're being affected by the withdrawal, the summary withdrawal, the extraordinarily fast and possibly ill thought out reform from Afghanistan. And in fact, we're pushing them further from ourselves, which means we're probably pushing them towards China and Russia. The Central Asian countries are an important bloc. They're rich in minerals, everything you can imagine, including uranium, rare earths, things like that, as well as oil and gas. And they're an important part of the world, generally overlooked by us. Their hope is that they can open trade routes to the south, so they don't have to rely on China and Russia as much as it seems they do. But that involves going to Afghanistan. I have just done an interview with a man called Frederick Starr, who's one of the great experts on that region, and he is appalled at what we're doing in Afghanistan or not doing. Having brought women into the fore, educated them, created a social ambience for them, we're suddenly abandoning and throwing them to the Taliban and to the extraordinary right-wing views of those people. It looks as though we didn't think this out. It looks as though we didn't think out the southern border very well. Sometimes I think there was an anxiety, or there is an anxiety in the Biden administration to undo everything that Trump did on principle. Now, I have no good words. I cannot find any good words for Trump. But that doesn't mean that it's good policy to simply untie everything because you didn't like the person who tied it up. I think we need a little readjustment here, or we're going to have international problems and domestic problems, and we're going to have to do something about the surging crime. People are genuinely frightened, genuinely worried that there is so much street crime suddenly. So there's a lot to be concerned about. Business is doing very well, I think. Overall, technology is driving it. Technology is in a golden age, and but it is not a golden age for every endeavor, for every enterprise, or for every policy.
Yeah, those are great points, Llewelyn. Amy, you see the world from a different point of view. You have a lot of customers and in the legal side of things, and maybe share some feedback from your point of view about COVID. Any lessons learned? How has COVID changed things? What's your take on the economy? Are we in a good spot? What does it look like in the coming months?
Definitely. So I do have a little bit different perspective, only because I've had a lot of clients reach out in the last year with the realization that their workforce has migrated, and often without notifying them. And so you find yourself as a company with a workforce who used to come into the office now may live in 4 or 5 different states, or possibly even different countries. And so the employee relations situation becomes quite difficult and more complex in those situations, as well, of course, as the laws. And I think that's really going to be a change coming out of COVID, is these companies are going to have to decide and have a real philosophical discussion amongst themselves on what they want their employees and their staff, their structure to look like going forward. Do they want to be a solely brick and mortar? Do they want to be a solely virtual? Or what kind of combination would fit them together?
Right.
As far as economically, I think that there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of jobs coming. And into Llewelyn's point, a lot of tech jobs. The workforce dynamic has changed for certain. There are a lot of different types of jobs out there that did not exist prior to COVID.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, tell me a little bit on the PEC side as a utility. Any changes, dramatic changes for them? Any lessons learned from how they're moving forward, reinventing themselves after COVID?
I think just like similar to all other companies, and especially in Texas, they are grasping the thought of the changing workforce, the needs of the company versus the needs of the employees.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of transformation going on, and as I remind you all, we always talk about, sort of a lot of the changes that are going on, telecom and smart buildings and smart cities and smart energy and a lot of stuff going on in smart energy. And I wanted to sort of get a sense from Amy on the industry seems to be well poised for all kinds of change and growth. Clearly, this administration is throwing a lot of money at climate change and clean tech, and there's all kinds of talks about a new great authority at the highest level, and there's all kinds of forces going on and introductions and new, transformations being led at California or by several big players, and everybody wants to be carbon neutral. And so what does this all mean at PEC? Is PEC kind of sitting back and listening, talking to their customers, and everybody's wondering, are we off the rail here? What's your take?
So actually for the last, since 2015 at the very least, and really since I've been on the board, the PEC board members have been focused on broadband because as a co-op, we're quite different than a regular utility where our members own the company, in fact. And we had a significant outcry for broadband, especially in 2020 with children and employees working from home. We found that a lot of our members were without capable internet to support their needs. And so prior to COVID, we had started discussing that and looking into the options. And by the time that we finally were able to, because the industry and the technology in broadband has changed significantly since 2015 alone, that the need had been serviced for most of our territory. And so where it wasn't, there had been a study and bond money per se by the federal government to help fund other corporate entities who are more versed in broadband. And so as we look forward to the future, looking into other smart technologies to better help the members is where our sights are set.
Got it. Yeah, you know, and it really the Pedernales service territory is gigantic. It's really enormous, and most people don't really know that. I can imagine that without broadband. So clearly, Amy, since you're getting finishing your degree in electrical engineering, I would imagine that anything conversations, you know, there's multiple service coming online. Starlink from Limas, you know, Blue Origin has another service coming up, the Dish Network, all kinds of satellite services coming up, and then there's 5G. So any thoughts on, you know, now that you can commit the company to anything, but any thoughts on all that? You guys are exploring all those things?
We have actually, we have made it a formal resolution letting our membership and the community as a whole know that we are open to assisting and facilitating the expansion of broadband into our rural territory, because that's where it's needed the most.
Right. Very interesting. Then the other thing that I wanted you to comment on, and again, I don't know how much you can comment on or not, but there seems to be something that you guys passed in December, a vote on a new rate structure regarding solar installs in your service territory. I have no idea if any of this that I'm about to share with you is true or not. So I wanted to kind of, for you to clear the air on all this, but apparently you guys were to vote in July 17, whenever your next board meeting is on that topic, on a new fee for solar panel installs of $600. And even if the install doesn't get approved, that the customer who makes that request has to pay $250 for inspection and consideration of PEC. Is this a lot of brouhaha, or is there anything here that is real?
Sorry about that. So going back to the fact that a co-op is quite different than a regular utility, we have to ensure that our fee structures, including not just our rates that we charge for power, but other things, compensate for our entire budget. We don't have the ability to go and make up money somewhere else if we were an MOU, or municipal utility owned. We also don't have investors. And so the $600 that has been discussed and thrown around, and unfortunately, a lot of these people have incorrect information. There were fees that were passed, and then there was a rate structure that was passed. And just to get it out there, I'm against the rate structure. I have been since the beginning. They wanted to adopt some changes to it, and although I'm not in favor of the changes, I'm not in favor of the whole thing, because it would disproportionately affect people whose solar systems are not appropriately sized. But going back to the fees, so there's a $200 fee and there's a $400 fee, and that is to compensate PEC for the time and engineering and application process of members applying for the process. Because possibly, as you are aware, but as most people are not, we actually have to go through an entire process with the Public Utilities Commission every time someone comes onto our system as a distributed energy resource.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
No, go ahead, John.
I was wondering, Amy, how did the governor's instruction to the PUC affect you? Which seemed to be sort of hostile to alternative generation, favorable to fossil fuels and maybe to nuclear. I just want to see how nuclear.
That is a very unfortunate fact. You are correct in that. And I try to educate as many people as I can, because as much as the board, even if we were wanting to go full solar or full renewables or just distributed generation, the laws in place in the state prevent us from doing so.
Are we likely to see any change to utility law in the special section of the legislature, which starts very soon?
I don't know.
It's not, I believe, on the agenda.
Right.
How they put on the agenda. How are you dealing with any charges you had to pay as a result of the deep freeze in February?
So we are having been discussions. We are still working on where everything has fallen, but PEC, thankfully, is not in trouble like some other entities ended up in trouble. Thankfully, we have a good management staff and have had for a couple of years, and they kept us in quite good shape as far as maintaining our system and keeping our budget and our books quite well afloat.
Are you a generator, and what is your generating mix?
No, we're not.
You're not a generator, you buy locally.
We have a battery, but during the winter storm, we couldn't keep that, the way the laws are, we can't keep that power for ourselves. We had to put it back on the grid for everyone else's use.
Amy, one of the great trends in America is the movement of people away from cities to rural areas. I myself am doing research on young data, and I concentrate on entrepreneurship, and I'm looking how entrepreneurs are moving to small towns in Texas. Texas Monthly had a great article 2 years ago on how wealth is moving to small towns. And of course, here around Austin, there used to be small towns called Pflugerville, small towns called Georgetown. So the reality is that the rural co-ops will face an interesting future. We look at the number of people who will move and the rural co-op structure and how it is managed. So my question is, given the movement, given the trend that actually Pedernales might be its own incorporated city, how do you prepare for such an onslaught? And finally, they're not bringing their electricity with them. How do you bring on and prepare for such an onslaught of the relationship between the movement of masses of people, not only to Texas, but people realize they're not just coming to Austin, they're going to Llano, they're going out seven, they're going everywhere. How do you prepare for that? Because your world is about to be totally changed.
That is a good point. Thank you for bringing that up, John. So actually, crazy is that in 2020, we had one of our largest growth rates for PEC ever. We had a record number of people move into the PEC territory, and it just continues to go. I know that the Leander area as well as the Kyle area have just exploded with homes everywhere, which of course means that PEC's concern is, how we're going to provide power to all of those people. And then of course, with people come businesses. So how are we going to provide power to all these businesses, and to what kind of businesses? And so again, thankfully and luckily, we've had a good management team over the past couple of decades who have prepared for that and looking ahead and making sure that we have adequate power agreements and facilities in locations that in the past may not have made sense. But now with the growth and where they are, those facilities are right in the middle of the heart of the growth.
But let me follow up with another question. I've had this in my research in organizations. I've had this thing in my mind that people like run the utilities and that traffic controllers are more institutional based with their values rather than occupational based. What that means is when we switched from, I was on Carter's group when we switched from the draft to the all volunteer force. The draft was legitimated by the love of the country, doing something that served the public, that was higher than a good, whereas the all volunteer force now is predicated on marketplace standards. How do I look at your co-op, and as you search for workers, do you have a sense where people in your co-op, much like the air traffic controllers or the industry in general, really feel pride in what they're doing, and they're serving over and above the typical marketplace standards when we hire people?
So that's another good point. Thank you. So actually, PEC won the best places to work in Austin and out of San Antonio for both Austin American Statesman and the San Antonio Express News, because our territory does reach all the way from Georgetown just to outside of New Braunfels, and then all the way over to past Fredericksburg and up near Junction, and then up towards Burnett. We have a very diverse employee group.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Amy, I'm curious about when you look at the points that John is making about the growth and the planning. One of the things that it strikes me as transformational is this notion of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, and I anecdotally always try to ask our guests that come from the utility world if they offer, they have any anecdotal feedback about, given the fact that power in Texas is relatively inexpensive, do you guys have any crypto miners mining coins in your service territory that are creating a little bit of havoc? Any story like that?
We don't have any causing any havoc, but I'm certain that we do, just because I know of a few personally.
Okay. It seems to be a new trend, a new job. A lot of people seem to be doing it more and more. It's very interesting what it does to the grid, right? And so this whole shift from commercial to residential load and the load curves and all that, it's definitely a big change. John, you had a follow-up?
Yes, I do. One of the things that I'm interested in, not only, of course, in the regular quote utility, but co-ops, is how do you guys think about emerging technologies that we got to grid? I mean, how do you think about microgrids? How do you think about grid edge? How do you think about keeping the lights on with all of the technologies that's being discussed about the movement of the grid? As you know, this is the first time that the grid has gained a political kind of stature. When the snow came and the lights went out, it was a different game. So there's a lot everywhere where people are talking about that. So how does a co-op prepare and think about all of the alternatives for keeping the lights on in the future through technology?
So we've actually had plans in the past to purchase the quote unquote smart meters, and that had nothing to do with the snowstorm. That was just because we knew that something like that event could occur, and also those meters would be able to give our members the ability to monitor their own power usage more effectively. As far as what can we do going forward to, anticipate or hopefully prevent a situation like we've had, or even worse, it getting worse. It's really, they would be theoretical at this point, because unfortunately, yes, the situation has been politicized, but not to the proper degree and not on the proper topic, because nothing has really changed. And it doesn't appear that in legislature, nothing's going to change, not unless something really catastrophic happens, and not unless you have the right people who understand the power grid and understand the benefits of microgrids and distributed energy resources, get up and explain these things and educate the legislatures. Nothing's going to happen, because we are bound by the laws that govern us.
One other question. One of the great things we have in Austin is an abundance of trees. I'm from southern Louisiana, Sabon, Como Sabah. We go crawfishing and we like to look at the big trees as they overlap the road. Well, we have communities in Austin. I'm sure that your co-op really think about preventative stuff, but there are trees everywhere. I would just like to know, which I never heard, the policy of how do you regulate or negotiate all of the gorgeous trees wherever and keeping the lights on. When people say, well, don't cut my trees, and then we have a crisis and the trees disturbed and the limbs disturbed. How do you negotiate that with your people?
So we, fortunately for PEC, because we have a very a stout, I would say, tree trimming policy, and making sure that we do not have any trees that are going to damage the power lines. And in case events, just like in the freeze, I want to say less than 3% of the outages that were caused by tree limb failure, tree limbs falling on the lines and causing a failure. And so, yes, the trees are beautiful. Yes, we want to make sure and keep them, which is also why that part of PEC's policy is that we have certified arborists that inspect the plans and ensure that heritage trees are being pruned properly, because we can't help where a tree grows if it grows right in the middle of the power line, but we certainly can make sure and try to take care of that tree if at all possible. Sometimes we cannot, because sometimes we have to make the decision to take the tree out, and then we also will go and help homeowners try to make decisions as well.
Yeah, let me share something for everybody to see my screen, because I think this is really powerful. So you all can see hopefully my screen, and this is the service territory of Pedernales, and they have a few outages right now, and it's massive, right? I mean, it's northern Austin all the way to San Antonio, all the way to almost Fredericksburg, and then this other piece of their service territory that most people don't realize is humongous. Rock Spring Junction, which is where the headquarters is. And it's just wow. What an incredible chunk of land they manage. And so they have great technology. Their customers can see immediately what's going on and where are the outages. And I just wanted to, for the record, show everybody that they have a great service territory.
Thank you.
Llewelyn, you're muted. You're muted, sir. Unmute yourself. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. I'd like to add to the vegetation control that this is something to do with the kinds of populations that it moves through. I used to live out in rural Virginia, but close to Washington, about 50 miles out, in the service territory of the NOVEC, Northern Virginia Electric Cooperative, a very large and powerful co-op, which has actually become more urban as the area has become more urban. But they were ruthless in vegetation control, and I had to argue with, not negotiate, but argue with actual people who came with saws to cut down trees, that they could maybe remove a few critical limbs. In Washington, D.C., not very far away, the situation is entirely different. It's very difficult for PEPCO, the resident utility, to take down any trees, largely, Amy, and I'm sorry to say this because the density of lawyers in Washington is quite overwhelming. And they will rush into court to get an injunction to save a tree. And as a result, there are more blackouts in Washington than there are in rural Virginia. It's a function of the society not allowing vegetation control. On the other hand, I do think there could have been some technological improvements, maybe as in some countries, higher poles or more lines that are more resistant to the kind of blow they can get from a tree if it's just a limb. Obviously not if it's a whole tree falling on. But you've got a big problem there in vegetation control. Now suddenly in the West with the wildfires, it becomes critical because if you lose a line and it falls into a highly combustible ground cover, you're going to get a wildfire, a very large problem in the West. I think not so much in Texas, not so much in the area where I am now in New England, but it is quite a science, vegetation control, which most people have never heard of. They take it for granted.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And let me just comment, this is why it is so interesting now when people talk about different things and talk about developers. Vegetation control is mentioned. Never before since I've been here for the last 40 plus years, have there been such a discussion or not, about the grid and what might happen in the future. Will people cut their trees down? And this is a brand new message, if you will, on the public square in Texas and in America. Mhm.
Yeah, totally, totally. So lots of other things to discuss real quick to get a sense from Amy on what's going on at PEC. In the whole notion of smart cities, lots of stuff going on, and obviously PEC services a lot of cities. It services, Cedar Park and Kyle, Buda, Lampasas, Vernon, Monroe Falls. I mean, you name it. It's tons of cities, and they're growing like nuts. Is this thing about smart cities and digitalization, and clearly broadband is a thing that you mentioned that is an important piece of that. But is this something are these cities coming to you guys, Amy, and are they knocking on your door? They're asking for help. What's going on there?
Not yet. We haven't had a whole lot of municipal outreach, not unless, of course, individual citizens get involved in the city council, and then occasionally city council will reach out, but not in the broad scale that we would hope.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like it may come at some point. We see this trend nationwide where small cities with not large budgets and not enough technology savvy staff reach out to larger utilities that have a lot more sophistication and experience managing things like this. And it seems that at some point this will be something that will start getting as a priority, primarily because of the folks that are leaving the cities, moving to the rural towns, and at some point they're going to want similar kinds of services and capabilities. And so stay tuned, as they say. The other big trends that we track is this whole notion of the smart buildings trends, and obviously there's a lot going on there. Interestingly enough, Harris County increased the efficiency of their fleet of buildings, 150 buildings. They just did a deal with Honeywell to manage their buildings, reduce their carbon footprint, and automate things in a very fashion. And more seems like companies that or agencies that own fleets of buildings are trying to focus on the buildings themselves as the next set of evolution. And I know that ultimately, as we coined the term positive energy power plants in my book in 2011, just go read chapter 7, the advanced smart grid, and you can see we talk about all the homes and all the buildings, commercial, industrial, becoming power plants. It's somewhat inevitable over the years to come. But there's another trend that is really interesting, Amy, around smart cities, which is electric vehicles. I don't know if you drive an electric vehicle or not. Maybe you do. Tell us, what do you drive, Amy?
So I do. I have an electric vehicle and I love my car. But I'm also responsible when I'm charging it. I make sure to, if I'm charging it at home, I only charge it at night. And I try to always charge it at home, because if I'm not charging at home, then of course I'd be charging it during the day when I shouldn't be. And so I think that comes a lot to, the social responsibility, the individual responsibility of it all is, I'm sure we all grew up with the education of make sure you turn the lights off when you leave the room, make sure you don't leave the TV on when you leave the house, those kinds of simple things. Well, we really have to get more social conscious and aware of our power usage as individuals going forward. Otherwise, we're going to have to get used to brownouts and blackouts, because most literally, especially in Texas, the grid just can't handle the population growth.
Right.
I would like to bring our conversation somewhat round to where we began, in the social impact of working at home, but also the social impact of people leaving the cities. The cities aren't going to be empty, they're going to be filled up with poorer people which is going to change the economics, even the appeal of the cities. We've seen this in the past. We've got, for example, after 1968, where you had white flight out of particularly Washington, D.C. I was there at the time after Martin Luther King was assassinated. We had this huge flight to the suburbs, and the city of Washington, D.C. became poorer with all the elements that came with that, with the lack of enough middle class in the city. Are we going to see this in other cities? Are we going to see poor people, poor immigrants, hapless people flooding into the cities, people who were maybe traditionally rural? I've seen, for example, in Virginia, where homes that have been owned by minorities since the Civil War were sold for what seemed like a lot of money, which really wasn't, because they were either totally refurbished or they were replaced, and those people ended up living in the cities in awful apartment buildings and woke up to realize that they had made a terrible mistake in selling their properties. We may be seeing that again, this redux of what we saw in 69, 70 around most cities in the US.
Interesting.
Again, for other reasons, this time pandemic.
Yeah. Those are interesting points. I don't know that any of us have a crystal ball on that, but John, where are we? How do you feel about the change of the business model?
John has a crystal ball, but he keeps it out of sight.
John, where are your thoughts on the shift of population into social science and tracking what's going on? How does the gig economy, where are we at? It seems like we're in a huge inflection point.
Well, in Austin, Texas, we're the place where if we keep going, some people just will not be able to live here.
Mm-hmm.
That is, we have people who are rooted in, but we also have people who are selling their homes and moving out.
Mm-hmm.
We have people, when their workplace said, okay, you can work at home, they sell their home. My executive secretary sold a home at a very, very good place, and they went to the lake and built him a house with the money that was given. Mm-hmm. So I think if you look at it, first of all, it's going to be regional. The movement is toward the entrepreneurial regions. We saw this, for example, in going to San Francisco and what happened to Silicon Valley. It's just hard to live there. We saw what happened in the 17 and 1800s in Manhattan, New York. It's just very, very difficult to live there. I think that in terms of Llewelyn's point, I think on the racial stuff is not as concentrated as it was in the cities. And remember, these were northern cities, for the most part. Mm-hmm. So you look at all of the population trends. You have immigrants coming, but the big movement of people within America. It is a movement that's almost similar to moving to Detroit in the 1930s and 1940s. But here's the difference. It is selected on education. So Austin, Texas is interesting. Over 50% of the people have college degrees. That was unheard of in the manufacturing economy. Okay, one of the best economies in the world that was done there for people without degrees. The Detroits and etc. So what we'll do, we'll juggle around, and there will be fallout. But the selectivity is based on what you can do. If you look at electric cars coming to Austin, 15 years ago, manufacturing was not welcome in Austin. We have changed because this is a different type of manufacturing that's based in the technologies having to do with electricity. So the country has always shifted. Prior to, people went west for gold, and then after World War II, there was a shift in the north to suburbs. We have small towns in Louisiana. We don't call them suburbs. That's a northern term, I might add, but I put up with it because Llewelyn, I don't want to make him mad. We have small towns in the great state of Louisiana. You call somebody, say I'm the suburb, they say, where? Oh, you mean you from
Llewelyn, he's talking about you.
I'm listening.
My point is, there will always be movement.
Everybody goes through a day without.
And one other thing, the wealth toward Texas. When you look at migration, you don't just look at who's moving. You look at the wealth. The wealth in Texas and the movement of wealth to Texas is off of the scale. Wealth to people who make up the top 1%, wealth to people who are entrepreneurs, wealth to people who are retiring. And so it's not just the person that's moving to get a job. It is the wealth who can also invest and create other new kinds of jobs through different kinds of entrepreneurial activities. So that's what I see that's coming. Remember, Texas created 4 times to 5 times the amount of jobs in any state in the union.
Let me just say that this about Texas has moved from extractive industries, which is where it gained its original wealth, with a certain both a political class and a, if you will, an establishment based on the extractive industries, to a much more creative time, much more value added, much more manufacturing, and much more intellectual activity than was the case heretofore. So the transformation within Texas is really quite profound. I found that my columns are fairly often published in the Houston paper, and I find this reflected in the correspondence I get as a consequence. Texas has changed hugely in the 50 years that I have been going to Texas, which I did a great deal when I was publishing the Energy Daily and during the crisis.
I agree with you, absolutely. We should wear computer hats rather than cowboy hats. How's that?
Maybe you should wear orthopedic hats.
Orthopedic hats.
Yeah.
Let me add some real life of examples to that. I mean, SpaceX just announced that they're hiring 30 plus technical integration folks to help build Starship, which is basically one of the things that Musk is building in his whole project called Starbase. This is all happening in Brownsville. So if you want to get the job of the future, the openings are there. SpaceX is hiring in Brownsville right now, big time. And the job description reads like, I'm going to Mars and the moon and playing with rockets every day kind of thing. It's quite amazing what's going on. So I imagine that this is part of the challenge and the attraction. Amy, you've done high tech for a long time. You are on the board of directors of PEC. You are studying to be an electrical engineer. What is your take? You seem to be a next generation executive, getting ready, have all the skills, all the talent. What do you think the future looks like? All high tech, all technology?
I am fairly certain that we will have gone to Mars by the time that I am retired. But I would have to say, with all of the growth and all of the companies in the industry coming here, and even for the entrepreneurs, Texas really needs to think about the economic development aspect of that and ensuring wage gaps are not increased and in fact are lessened, and ensuring that those jobs, those tech jobs, are appropriately paid. I've seen all too often where a company will move to the state and they will get some great deal from the state and the county as far as tax breaks, but then they offer terrible wages to their employees. And so we have to be sure that we keep a good eye on that.
I agree.
You said that, Amy. That's very important. Part of the move that we've seen over the past 3 decades from the north to the south has been companies not seeking a superior life, but a cheaper workforce, largely because most of the South are 14B anti-union states, and whatever you think about the unions, they have succeeded in keeping working wages higher in the North.
You're exactly right. And I'm sure we had those conversations with the manufacturing. I know that our city leaders did with manufacturers that's moving into Texas. We do not want to create another bus belt, if you will.
Yeah. Let me take a quick commercial. Digital 360 Summit is coming up August 31st to September 2nd. We are 100% head down on this. It's going to be an amazing event. It's in person, the Embassy Suites Conference Center and Spa in San Marcos. We will have panels and keynotes on network sensors, data, software, utilities, cities, mobility, buildings and infrastructure, energy and utilities, water and wastewater, smart factories, and more. Here are some of the speakers from last year, and we're looking forward to having many more. And I want to thank TXST for sponsoring the Digital Roundtable. I know that all this journey that we're into is fairly fascinating. Seems that the battles in telecom and the battles now on the rockets and the battles in software, the cloud, seem to be intensifying themselves. But one thing remains clear to us, and we have been sounding the alarm for a long time. I think you in many ways are sounding that same alarm, Amy, which is as we digitize our world, the need for electricity production will grow dramatically. If anybody buys a Tesla like you have, Amy, and then we don't produce enough energy today to charge all these things. And we need to think differently about how we go about doing that without killing ourselves. And so I don't know if you have any closing comments around that, but that seems to be the biggest challenge is the regulatory front.
Sure, and I completely agree. It's time to take advantage of the expanded technology available, especially around distributed energy resources and advanced computer engineering. There has to be a better way. And really, it's going to have to start with the state legislature and even possibly the federal government to promote those types of resources and utilization of the technology even, because we will find ourselves in increasing and more severe brownouts and blackouts if we do not.
I think we've discussed this. The grid is running overall on the 1962 technology. We talked about SCADA that was standardized, and certainly is a 1962 technology. We talked about the fact that the grid is where computers were 50 years ago. And Llewelyn always reminds us that when we become smart, we will be hacked. But the fact of the situation is, here's the fact. We have made this run with this grid because it still works. And you're exactly right. It's going to take a public-private partnership, just like we did with MCC, for investors to come in and say, okay, we need to change the grid. We need to change the grid edge. We're going to let Andre Carvallo come in and make everything smart, connect everything together. We're going to have billions of Internet of Things hooking up to 5G in the future. And as you said so prophetically, we're not ready for all of this in Texas. As you know better than me, when you plug your car up, that is a download. That's not like plugging in, right? Plugging in my cell phone. So my question to you is this. We like to say, will America put up the stop sign after the accident? Or we put up that stop sign before the accident?
Right, and that's exactly the conversation that needs to be had.
I'd like to ask Amy, I know we're at the end of our time, but there are a great many utilities in Texas. There are 19 municipal utilities alone, and then we've got the co-ops and we've got the investor-owned. Should they consolidate? Are there too many electric utilities in Texas?
I don't think so. I'm a full fan of being able to have a say in the energy resources and the power company that you're involved in. So I wouldn't say, making one distribution hub for everyone. However, really the way that the state operates under the laws and the rules under the PUC and ERCOT, it almost kind of feels that way, because regardless of where you look, other than the budget and the money flowing in and out, everyone's operating under the same archaic rules that are stifling to progress.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, well, it's been wonderful. Unfortunately, all great things must come to an end, and it is our time to take it away. Amy, thank you for being with us today. We appreciate your insights and your honesty, and wish you all the best in tracking you. We'll look forward to seeing you August 31st in San Marcos. I don't know if you have any final comments or anything else you want to share. Did you get reelected yet?
Yes, I have another 3-year term on PEC.
Excellent. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for having me today. It was lovely seeing you and Llewelyn and John. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, and lovely seeing you too.
Thank you.
Johnny, take us away.
Front porch sitting in an old rocking chair. The sun is high in the Texas sky. Garden growing, clothes out on the line. A dusty road when a car goes by. Storytelling of things long ago. The only place she'd ever been. Singing softly, this world is not my home. My memories take me back again. When I was young and Grandma wasn't old, and how she guided me as I watched my life unfold. Anything we didn't have, we didn't really need to hold. When I was young and Grandma wasn't old. A little rural stuff for you, Amy.
Woo! Thank you.
Thank you. That was great.
Brilliant, brilliant.
Thank you. So, Amy, you